Hey YouTube, well welcome back. Welcome back to the Hard Reset. I'm Nick. Yeah, wanted to talk about this topic of this question: Are we all pretenders? I think it's fair to say we all, to some degree, some more than others, we all pretend to be at times someone maybe we're not, right? Um, Buying things to present a a picture or representation uh, of a life we have that maybe is not true to what it really is, or buying things that maybe we can't really afford to put out the illusion that we can, um, especially in relationships. We we try to put up this version of ourselves that's not actually who we are, or maybe what we're truly after, right? And that, we it's not a surprise that gets us into trouble later. um and on the opposite side of things, it's like, where does being truly authentic and meeting another person where they are, um what am I trying to say? It's like interacting with somebody else who's being truly authentic and being authentic yourself, like how that's so how it's so valuable, right? That should be a really treasured situation, right? um because there's a lot of cases where people get into relationships. In the dating phase, they're pretending to be a person that they think the other person wants to see. Not everybody, obviously. I think there are, I think, the lucky ones who present who they are, who they truly are in the first few dates, and that is an accurate version of who they truly are. And um, maybe it's the opposite case where they change over time, and their their partner is like, you used to be this way and now you're not. That maybe that's a different problem. But I know, I mean, I mean, as somebody who has recently gone into the dating market again, has had failed relationships. Um, from my point of view, it happens when people's expectations don't meet who the person who the person really is, right? So if an example could be, um, somebody who wants kids, but the person they're interested in doesn't want kids. So the person who wants kids gets into the relationship, says, yeah, um, kids happen. If they happen, fine. If they don't, that's also fine, right? Maybe they go into the relationship with that, presenting um, that version of themselves, right? And obviously, the relationship, it matures. They share a bunch of time together, and that like little kernel of, they they at the beginning they secretly really wanted children. Well, that comes up later, right? Whether they bring it up in conversation, or somehow that topic gets gets broached, right? And then another person's like, you know, you said you never wanted kids, or you said you'd be fine. I understand people change, right? But I think it's fair to say there are cases where people go into it not fully transparent of how they really feel, sometimes hoping the other person changes their mind or becomes flexible on that topic, right? Or another dynamic is uh, like a guy going into a relationship with a new person, a new woman, and saying like let's say their real objective is just to sleep with her, right? But he comes in and he says, I'm looking for a long-term relationship, where I could find a real connection or something like that, right? That's not accurate to how he really feels, but he's pretending, right? To to get um to get what he wants from her. She thinks that he really wants a long-term relationship, and obviously decides to date him or have a relationship with him with the expectations that it's going to go somewhere long term, and eventually, inevitably, right, or probably, uh after he gets what he wants, then maybe that relationship ends and she's left thinking like, well, um what happened there, right? Like, why did it end, or why did I get ghosted? Not saying anybody's good or bad in this situation, but again, this idea of pretending to be somebody we're not, politicians, right? Running on a campaign idea or an ideology, getting elected, and then once you're elected, it's like, yeah, I don't even have to really, like, not aligning on those ideals or the promises that one made, um, at the time of campaigning, right? Uh, Job interviews, right? And I think this is a good point to make a distinction between presenting your best self and pretending. I think there is a difference between those. Like I said, this is a topic I'm still thinking about. It just hit me, and I was like, that's a really interesting dynamic that seems to occur in a lot of places. But yeah, going back to the job interview or trying to get a job somewhere, right? I think we've all been there where you're in the interview, you've done your homework, what the position is, what they're looking for, and I think this is kind of where the two could kind of like uh diverge, right? One is you present your best self, you know your abilities, you you know how you have a rough idea of how you would operate in that role to the best of your ability. Maybe there's areas that you would grow once you get hired, but your intentions are to fulfill those promises. And then there's the other scenario where you're just more focused. And again, no judgment here, but I think we could admit that this happens. You're going into it saying what you think they want to hear so that you can get the job. And your real goal is to get the job, to get paid, and move, progress in your career, right? Um, I don't think it's in dispute why what the logical end goal is in pretending, right? Like the one example with the man and the woman in a relationship. The guy's trying to sleep with the girl. He gets that, and you know, I guess on his end, mission successful, right? that deception has that goal. With a politician, right? It's like you run on that campaign platform, you get elected, well, mission accomplished. Like, uh, same thing. The job, you say what you think they want to hear, they like what they hear, you get the job, mission accomplished, right? Now, the more thinking I thought on this is that, well, you have this pretending on one end, right? I'm not challenging this from some moral or ethical point of view, just observing, um, because I think we all do it. And for my own life, I try to think about how that fits in my own life. But yeah, we have the pretending on one side, and the counterpoint to that would be being your truly authentic self, like win or lose, right? Um, without the agenda, um, without the shorter term agenda of achieving that goal, but more like living true to who you really want to be, right? And yeah, because on one hand you have the short term goal, but there's consequences to that, right? And then on the other hand, you have your authentic self, which you're like, and this I want to distinguish this from saying stuff with no filter and not caring who you offend. I think that's different. I'm not saying that, but more like living to be um, a more virtuous, authentic self, right? And I think what happens, and it happens in different degrees, right? But when you have two parties and you have one person pretending and you have the other person on the receiving end of this interaction where they're on the receiving end of this pretending, they have expectations, right? They have certain expectations. Like for the example of the man and the woman, she has the expectation of a long-term relationship. He's pretending to, he's saying what she wants to hear. And when those expectations are not met, obviously, that makes that side unhappy, angry, and that produces consequences for the pretender, right? Same thing with um, the job interview, I guess, right? You get the job, but now you have the job, and all those promises, all those things you said that they wanted to hear. Maybe you couldn't deliver on all of them, or you didn't have intent. You didn't have any real intentions on delivering on those promises, and the employer's like, "Hey, we hired this guy, and he said he's going to do X, Y, and Z, and we haven't seen that yet, and we're kind of disappointed. So maybe you get written up, or you get talked to saying this is not like what the job description requirements were, right? Maybe you get fired, maybe you get laid off, right? And same thing with a politician, right? They get in office, and then they fail to deliver on the promises, and you know their constituents are like, what the heck happened? Like, this this guy, this girl, like, they're not who they said they were. Like, and that could either become a pattern, and now you're that politician that people are like, yeah, that person doesn't do what they say they're going to do, or they lose faith in general in politicians and give the broader group of politicians a bad name, or that person runs again, doesn't get reelected because they didn't deliver on their promises, and maybe that's kind of the end. Then their career kind of just like fizzles out, right? Or they have some other negative consequence that happens due to the unmet expectations of their constituents or their colleagues, for example, right? And yeah, so I don't know where I want to go with this next. I definitely want to make another video on this as I'm thinking about it. But I think on the opposite end of things, when you do when you represent or put forward your true self, and in this case, this is the distinction between putting forward not only your authentic self, but I guess um, putting your best foot forward, um, the best version of yourself, right? Because just because you may not have to pretend, but you can still put the best version of yourself forward, and that's distinctly different than pretending, right? Because you don't want to show up like you don't want to show up to an interview and say like, well, I don't want to pretend, so I'm going to show up like looking like a slob. No, that's not really like, you wouldn't want to do that, because you wouldn't want to make the argument, well, I'm not comfortable in a suit, so I want to be comfortable, so I'm going to go there, go to the interview in sweats. Maybe in some like some places maybe that could kind of work, but it's more about like putting um your best foot forward, presenting your best self. I think that still aligns with putting your most authentic self. And I think there's also a degree of pretending where it's like a white lie, right? It's like if somebody, you were going to go to somebody's graduation, right? And maybe the graduation is boring. You're authentically, you're like, I'm really bored, I'd rather not be here, I'd rather be doing something else. But you smile, you're supportive of the person graduating and of the family, or whatever, and you're like, congratulations, and you smile, and like that's acceptable, even though you're sort of pretending, right? Yeah, you would rather be doing something else. You're like, I'd rather be fishing, or just taking a nap, or whatever, right? So there's that degree. Like I said, it's like a white lie. But yeah, going back to the original question, it's like or the original topic, the big question of asking, are we all pretenders? And where does that go? What is the bigger end goal of that? Because I think when you're truly authentic, and I think this is like a thing to aim for. I don't know if it's like something anybody actually achieves and says, I reached ultimate authentic, I'm always my authentic self every time I've reached it. I'm perfect. I don't think it's something you can ever reach. It's something more you aim for. You use it as like a guiding thing to shoot for. um I do think that a lot of discontent and consequences come from pretending, and like I said, those expectations. So there is consequences to that. And on the other side, when you're your authentic self, and the other side receives and accepts that authentic self, I think that right there, where um your authentic self is accepted, this is starting to sound a little touchy feely, but yeah, when it's received as it is, I think that's something to be really I guess it's definitely rarer. I don't know how rare it is in everyday life, but it's definitely something to be cherished, cherished, and and treasured. Uh, and like I said, it's is rarer, and you know, to kind of close it out. This video, you know, I've been talking to somebody recently, and you know, romantically, it's still in like the early stages, but yeah, there was something interesting in the early interactions where there was a certain directness, right? There was directness, but there was awkwardness as well. Like I think there you had both of them because it was refreshing, because I think there are a lot of times I've been the uh, the one on the pretending side, the performing side, and like the receiving side, where you say things that just sound nice, and you know, easy smiles, and just like you say phrases that come easy, that sound nice, and all that, and you're saying what the other person wants to hear. You're kind of putting on this performance, and then you're what you're doing is you're setting these expectations that are not necessarily true um, to who you really are. They're not like way off, but you know, they do set it up to be like, oh well, I thought this person was this, or I thought they did this career, but it's really not that, or um, you know, just certain expectations. I won't get into them, but on the other side, going back to the direct and awkward interaction, is that you know, like these other relationships, when you're putting on like this performance, well, there's a high chance that later on in the relationship, if it progresses further, is like they kind of discover who you really are, and if it doesn't match up, then they're like, this is not he's not who I thought he was, or she's not who I thought she was, right? Or she said this, but it's not lining up, or he said this and it's not lining up. But there's something interesting is when you're direct in the beginning and upfront, it's disarming, it's awkward, so it might be uncomfortable, but you know where they stand, and it's like yeah, you know where they stand, and there's something really interesting about it, and refreshing. And I think I mean, obviously I need to think about this more, but there's like a level of connection that's that just makes more of an impression on you, and uh, it creates a connection that's it stands out, right? It stands out as unique, and like you know, going back to the it's rare, and an opportunity to for both for both sides to get more out of it, right? I think I think authenticity is is, I don't know if it's rare. It definitely seems rare, but I think it's definitely um, something to be valued. I don't think it's a given, and I think it's somewhat hard to find. I think as a parent too, I think about uh, I've known my child obviously since she was born, but children don't come into the world with that ability to pretend, right? I mean, pretend in terms of like presenting this version of, babies don't say like, "Oh, I got to act cute so I get what I want." They're just existing as they are, and we love them unconditionally. And there's obviously very special bond, right? It's a very unique bond. There's no other replacement for that kind of bond. But again, it's like that connection is authentic, right? And as we get older, we start to learn how to pretend. And um, yeah, I just thought it was an interesting thing because I think as adults, we can still go back to to pretending less, um, being authentic, which sounds like that sounds so like it feels like something like we hear all the time. Yeah, just be your authentic self. But I think to truly do that is something different than what we hear every day. Because even true authenticity, I think it's something to be marketed. Um, like we use it in how we market not just products but ourselves. We're like, yeah, let's be authentic. It sounds good too, and it's not really true. Authenticity is not always there. um, but I think we could be intentional about really tapping into authenticity, being our authentic self, and putting that out there. And when we interact with another person, um, I think you get more out of that relationship. And I think another place that I've seen it is when you meet somebody, oddly enough, is like a stranger to you, like you don't know them, or you almost know you're not going to cross paths with them again. And what that does is that actually takes the pressure off, so you don't have this need to perform or to pretend, right? And I wonder if that's why you can have those really profound moments of connection with a complete stranger, right? Because you go into it thinking, I don't need to impress this person. I'm never going to see them again. And then maybe you do become friends with them. And then, uh, that's how you've kind of were able to get to the authentic stage of that relationship, right? So I know I've been rambling. Um, and yeah, I'll come back as I do more thinking on this. But yeah, I wanted to put that out there as like just the thought of how I just think it's such a weird idea, but I think it holds true, is that we all to some degree are pretenders. And just the bigger question of like why do we do it? Where are we trying to go with that? Um, it seems like more based in short-term thinking, short-term goals, or it's based in trying to get something. But I think it comes at a price. It comes at a price of finding true, genuine connections, which sounds like, again, like marketing cliche language. But I think it, I do think I'll end it kind of here. I do think it is on a macro level, it is a possible real explanation for broader unhappiness across, in terms of interactions between people. Because when it becomes more systemic, you have people failing to deliver on the expectations of others on a very broad scale. um you have more unhappy people, like and then yeah, um like in a perfect world, right, you'd have the guy that's interested in just getting just sleeping with the woman, finding a woman that just wants to sleep with a guy, and then they find that, if they were only honest, they found each other and they're like, oh, this is what, you know that's probably a more ideal situation. But we'll leave it there in terms of like, where does this pretending, where does it take us from here? I'm not judging, I'm not passing judgment on it. Like I said, I do it too. But as I try to look into myself and think about like the relationships I want, as a parent as well, like the way I want to teach my child about relationships, and also to not, um, to steer clear of inauthentic people. Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and so until next time, let me know what you think in the comments. I'm Nick, and this has been The Hard Reset. Take care.